So what actually happens inside your brain when you use an AI writing assistant? We all use them. But a new MIT study, literally called Your Brain on ChatGPT, decided to put it to the test. And honestly, the results are pretty startling. Let's dive right in.
Look, tools like ChatGPT are incredible, right? They can spit out these polished, perfect answers in seconds. But there's this nagging question that just won't go away. What's the trade-off here? Is all of this amazing convenience actually making our own brains a little weaker?
All right, Section 1, the perfect assistant. Large language models, LLMs, they promise to be the ultimate productivity hack. But as we lean on them more and more, we have to start asking what we might be giving up in return. And, this isn't some new fear. Frank Herbert was writing about this way back in 1965 in his classic novel, Dune. It's a really powerful idea, and it perfectly frames what we're about to investigate. What happens when we let the machines do the thinking for us? Okay, Section 2, the essay experiment. To try and find some real answers, researchers at MIT designed this really clever experiment to measure what really happens when you use an AI to help you write an essay. So here's the setup. Pretty straightforward. They took 54 university students, and over 4 months, they split them into 3 groups. Everybody had to write a bunch of essays. But, and this is the key, they had to do it under very different rules. And here are the teams. First up, you had the LLM group, who could only use ChatGPT for help. Then you had the search group. They were allowed to use Google, but absolutely no AI tools. And finally, you had the brain-only group, who had nothing but their own wits to get by. Which brings us to Section 3, clues in the aftermath. Okay, so all the essays are handed in. Now the real detective work can begin. The researchers started digging through everything, the text itself, the students' behavior, and even their brain activity, looking for clues. And the very first clue was a real head-scratcher. They ran all the essays through this advanced language analysis, and it turns out they all looked pretty much the same. Stylistically, you couldn't tell which group wrote which essay. A dead end? Not quite. Because the real story wasn't in the essays at all. Nope. It was in what the students remembered about writing them. The interviews they did after the writing sessions, that was the key that unlocked this whole thing. And here is the first absolute bombshell. Check this out. The researchers asked students to just quote one single sentence from the essay they had just finished writing. And for the ChatGPT group, a shocking 83.3% of them couldn't do it. It's like the words went from the screen to the page without ever really passing through their memory. And that feeling of detachment, it shows up again right here when they asked about essay ownership. Look at the brain-only group on the far right. Nearly 90% of them felt like the work was truly theirs. Now look at the ChatGPT group on the left. Only 50%. Using the AI created this massive psychological distance from their own writing. Okay, so Section 4, a look inside the brain. The behavioral clues were powerful, for sure, but the researchers wanted to go deeper. They wanted to see what was physically happening inside the students' heads, so they hooked them up to EEG scanners to measure their brain activity while they were writing. Now, before we see the scans, we need to get our heads around this key concept called cognitive offloading. It's basically a fancy term for when we use a tool, like our phone for directions or an AI for writing, to reduce our own mental effort. Our brain literally outsources the job. But what's the consequence of doing that all the time? And here it is. This is the smoking gun. This is a visual of the students' brains at work. Each one of those lines represents a connection between different brain regions. More lines means more activity. Just look at the brain-only group on the right. It is lit up, a dense web of connections. Now, look at the ChatGPT group on the left. It's quiet. The brain is just so much less engaged. This chart really just sums it all up perfectly. You can see a clear trend. The more external help the students had, from a simple search to a full-on AI, the less their own brains were actually firing. It's this clear inverse relationship. As the tool's power goes up, our brain's engagement seems to go down. So now for Section 5, the group switch up. But the researchers weren't done yet. For their last trick, they added one final, absolutely brilliant twist to see if these effects were permanent. In the very last session, they flipped the script. They took the AI away from the ChatGPT group, forcing them to go brain only. And then they gave the AI to the group that had been using only their brains the whole time. What do you think happened? Well, the results here are fascinating. For the students who were used to the AI, their brain activity stayed low,
even when the tool was gone. It's like the habit of offloading had stuck with them. But the brain-only folks, when they got the AI, their brains were actually more active than the original AI users. It suggests they were treating the AI like a partner, not just a shortcut.
And that brings us to our final section, paying the cognitive debt. So, what's the final verdict here? After looking at all this evidence, the researchers came to a pretty sobering conclusion about something they call cognitive debt.
And this is really the core idea. AI assistants are incredibly efficient, but that efficiency seems to come at a cost. By outsourcing all that mental heavy lifting, we might be reducing our brain's engagement in the very skills like reasoning, memory, and synthesis that we think of as critical thinking.
The researchers really didn't pull any punches in their final paper. They said, and I'm quoting here, that the ChatGPT group performed worse at all levels: neural, linguistic, scoring. That means their brains were less active, their writing was technically less sophisticated, and they even got lower scores from human graders.
So let's just recap the big takeaways. It looks like over-relying on AI can lead to decreased brain connectivity, it can hurt your memory of your own work, and it can reduce your sense of ownership over your ideas. And maybe most critically, these effects might actually stick around even after you stop using the tool.
Now look, the point here isn't that these tools are bad. They are absolutely incredible. But this study forces us to ask a really crucial question. How do we use AI as a true collaborator, as a tool that actually enhances our thinking, instead of one that just replaces it? How do we get all the benefits without paying that cognitive debt? That's something we're all going to have to figure out.